Welcome back to The Disturbing Truth. I'm Mr. Black. This video will be the last episode of 2021. Let me start by wishing you all a happy holidays and the best possible new year. This year was amazing for this channel thanks to people like you. While I only started The Disturbing Truth at the halfway point of 2021, the progress we've made together has reflected years of effort, and I put most of mine into this channel. But I couldn't have done it without you. Whether you're a subscriber on YouTube or even a Patreon member, you've been personally helping The Disturbing Truth flourish, and I couldn't be more grateful for what you've done. This episode is called The Checkup 2021. I'm going to go back over some of the uploads from the past year and try and air out any updates or even minor corrections I need to make about the stories. But whatever you do, don't skip this episode. There are some pretty big updates, specifically with the What Happened in Apartment 8641 story and the Monster and Fidel Lopez story, so stay tuned. Let's start way back with our first upload on the channel, 8 disturbing photos with chilling backstories. There's not much here to correct, but a couple people did call me on one thing. At 6:45 in the video, I refer to serial killer victim Regina K. Walters as a 14-year-old woman. And I put my hands up. You're right. It should be known that she is in fact not a woman. Regina K. Walters was a girl, a 14-year-old teenaged child. I think it's fair to address this correction in order to understand the gravity of the situation. I also left the letter A off of Regina's name on screen. Trust me that this is not out of disrespect. This was a simple accident that can happen to anyone. I create these productions by myself with no help. Sometimes there's gonna be typos. It's unintended, but it happens every once in a while. Apologies in advance. Regina's killer was Robert Ben Rhodes. At 7:20 in the video, I mentioned that he was big into the BDSM scene. A couple of people took offense to this in the comments and unsubbed immediately because they took this as me taking a swing at that kind of lifestyle. And, well, bye. Don't call us, we'll call you. I mean, these facts about this serial killer are quite literally that. Facts. I mean, geez, if Robert had worked at McDonald's, I would have mentioned that too. If he had a big fetish for rubbing Happy Meals all over his body while wearing a McFlurry and singing Old MacDonald, then I would definitely be mentioning that. But that doesn't mean I'm saying it's wrong. I wouldn't be taking a swing at fast food. It's just that that was a small fraction of what Robert Ben Rhodes was. Would you have been annoyed if I said the killer was a park ranger? What about a cage fighter? I mean, if you took offense to this, I question how secure you are about what you're into. Personally, I don't care. As long as you don't hurt people that don't want to be hurt, unless they consent, and then only if you don't kill them, or I don't know. Look, Robert Ben Rhodes was a truck-driving serial killer that was into BDSM. He hurt a lot of people. That's who he was. And in the pursuit of describing what kind of person Robert is, I mentioned that he happened to enjoy a certain type of lifestyle. Nothing more, nothing less. Moving on. The first real true crime case I covered was called What Happened to Samantha Koenig. It's a powerful case for sure, and I believe that in the future there's going to be more to this story, so I'll keep my ear low. But I must admit that the version I produced has a few mistakes that need to be addressed. The first mistake is at 5:14. I pronounced the word deterred wrong. I said deterred. I have learned from my mistake. So sue me. Then at about 6:45 in the video, I stated that when Israel Keyes went to Samantha's house after kidnapping her, she was still in the trunk of the car he was driving. I've already addressed this on screen in the video, but I just want to state here that Samantha was actually already being held captive in her killer's shed at this point. I read a conflicting report that contained misinformation. This channel started in the summer. I've only uploaded 11 times, so I'm still learning how all this true crime research works. Apologies, but I'll do my best to keep up with corrections. At 9:45 in the video, we see the ransom picture that Israel Keyes posted. On the screen, I state that this is the actual ransom photo, and it's not, which I'm kinda glad to hear. I was a little conflicted with how I felt showing that picture for a while. I settled for the thought that for educational value, it made sense to leave it in. It sends the message home. with a hard kick at the front door. But again, it's not the actual ransom photo. From what I now understand, this photo was a reenactment of the original ransom photo that was created for a TV show. Again, this mistake is due to conflicting reports. Still learning how to narrow down my sources. And while a ton of creators got fooled into thinking this was the actual ransom photo, to my knowledge, the real photo has never been released. Finally, in this video at 1818, the photo on the left that I've already blurred out is commonly believed to be Israel Keyes, but upon closer look, you can clearly see it isn't him, and admittedly, quite easily, because it's the Oklahoma City bomber, Timothy McVeigh, someone who Keyes looked up to. As I said, I've corrected this in the video already, but I just wanted to address it here too. And moving on. Our third upload was the twisted case of Gabriel Khan and Daniel Petrie. In this video, to my knowledge, most of the information is correct. But my Brazilian contact that studied this case has informed me that the crime actually happened in Daniel's house, not in Gabriel's. Also, in an update to the story, the Daniel theories are off. He is in fact alive and living in Brazil, and he has a daughter. It's also a quite common theory in Brazil that Daniel had been assaulting young Gabriel for quite a while, in other ways that YouTube doesn't like me to talk about. Good old Uncle YouTube. Moving on. Our fourth upload on the channel was the Ratman of Japan. And boy did I get some heat for mispronouncing the murderer's name in this video. You got me. But I'll be honest, no one seems to pronounce his name the same as anyone else. So I'm still not sure how to say it. At least his first name. Someone in the comments was nice enough to try and teach me how, but for the love of God, it still doesn't make sense to me. Hey, you said I was talented. I never said I was intelligent. But I believe his last name is Miyazaki, not Miyazaki. But in this world, it's important to remember that there's so many different types of languages and writing and spelling out there that it's hard to get it right all the time. Some people say Mexico, and some people say Mexico. I mean, my name's Justin. I live in Latvia. It's a country where pretty much every male name ends with the letter S, and the letter J makes a Y or U sound in English. So over here, some people actually call me Justins. When they take my name in their alphabet, that's what happens. I don't take offense. It's not disrespectful. Most of the people that do that don't really know me, and they're just trying to read my name in their language. It's not a big deal. When I lived in Northern Ireland, all of my friends from there would leave out the letter T in my name whenever they were saying it. Instead of saying, "Hey, Justin," they would go, "What's the crack, hey? What's happening, Justin?" I didn't give a damn, I just found it funny. I'm sure I messed up a ton of Irish names in my 16 years of living there. Go look up the Irish name Siobhan. Half of the letters in that name must be silent because the other half of the letters are dressed up as other letters. So, with all that said, I sincerely apologize for messing up Sasutono Maisaski's name. Also in the Ratman of Japan, I show this photo and I claim that it's Ratman's actual hands. This is simply not true. It's an urban legend that many of us have fallen for. A few commenters got really mad about this, so I'm sorry. I've cut out the part where I claimed that the picture is his actual hands. Again, there are multiple sources to dig through, and sometimes true crime creators do make mistakes. I hope this correction helps. Next up, we have the video, The Monster in Fidel Lopez. Yes, the guy who ripped out his girlfriend's insides. So, some people still believe Fidel Lopez, and they think he's telling the truth about Maria Nemeth, that her death was the result of rough sex. Let me be the first to tell you that that's clean mental and you're barking mad. Oh, and that's just based on the evidence out there. And I'm about to give you more. After I uploaded the video, I was surprised at how many people sympathized with Fidel. I mean, it was nowhere near a majority or anything, but a little tiny handful. Enough to be a little concerning. Some people even thought he was telling the truth and that suction from his fist caused Maria's insides to come out of her. So I went out and did two things. First, since I couldn't find it online, I obtained a copy of Maria Nemeth's full medical report. Then I consulted with a friend of mine who happens to be a doctor capable of reviewing that report with me. Let me start by saying that Maria had injuries all over her body, including a heavy blow to the back of the head and defensive wounds on her body. In Maria's southern regions, her 2-cavity entryways were so badly damaged that they couldn't be distinguished from one another. She was quite literally split between them, and that was just at the entrance and shortly past that. Inside, she had injuries that could only be made if Fidel used his fist and violently punched her in there with severe force repeatedly. This was not rough, playful fun, and it certainly wouldn't feel that way. The pain she would have been in would have been unbearable for anyone. And that's coming from a doctor. Also, Fidel pulled out several pieces from her body. One of those pieces was 13 feet long, and that was just one of the parts he pulled out. There were multiple pieces. This was not caused by suction. And this crime Fidel committed was not during a blackout. Notice in his testimony that he only doesn't remember things that make him look bad. Oh, he remembers everything else, including things that might make him look innocent in his situation, but he magically blanks out at the places that make him look even remotely violent. That's real magical, especially considering he doesn't remember anything that he did. And to answer another question someone had, no, according to the medical report, Maria was not pregnant. But there's something about this case we need to talk about. Fidel also mentions that Maria wanted him to stick things in her that night and that she'd never asked him to do that before. He also stated that he had never done that stuff with anyone else before either. Well, I had the chance to speak to Fidel Lopez's ex-girlfriend from high school. She wants to be kept anonymous, but she did provide me with a photo of her and him from back in the day. Looks like they were in high school. And I couldn't find that photo anywhere else online, so I got a feeling she's telling the truth. We'll call her Allison. Allison claims it didn't take much to make Fidel angry. She dated him for a year after he relocated to Florida from Cuba. Allison stated that Fidel was a highly jealous and controlling individual. He told her she wasn't allowed to wear leggings, and if a male friend of hers attempted to greet her in the hallway at school, Fidel would try and fight them at the drop of a dime. Allison said his mom was a nice, sweet, religious lady. Her and Fidel's father both worked nights at Walmart. They lived near the Everglades at the time. Fidel Lopez also has a fraternal twin, a brother. I'm not going to name his name. But strangely enough, Allison also stated that Fidel tried multiple times to stick objects in her, including a candle. She said he was her first, and this made her feel very uncomfortable. Ultimately, she just put it down to some kind of kink and went along with it, never thought much else about it. But nevertheless, I find it kind of odd, especially considering Fidel had never done anything like that before the night he claims Maria asked him to put stuff in her. Fidel reached out to Allison a few times via social media. The last time he did so was a week before he killed Maria, and he wanted to know when he'd see Allison again. She declined his offer. A short while later, his mugshot came up on her timeline. It quite literally could have been Allison if she'd chosen to meet with Fidel. Allison concluded that during the time she dated him, Fidel kind of seemed like a decent guy with a very bad temper. She did say one thing about Fidel that was odd. The last time Allison spoke to him, he had a lot of satanic pictures and writing on his Facebook page, including what she thought was Hebrew. According to her, Allison never believed in the devil until Fidel killed Maria. Now she thinks the devil is what took him over that night. But as for me, I don't blame anyone other than Fidel. He said he was mad about Maria mentioning another man's name, but at the same time, he was going behind her back to talk to his ex-girlfriend about meeting up. If you're still fooled by the lies of Fidel Lopez, there isn't much I or anyone else can do for you. He's a monster. He's where he belongs, and he's never leaving. Now, I think we've pretty much summed that up for the second time. The next case we covered this year was what happened to Richard Huckle. I have nothing to add or take away from this case. Some people were annoyed that I called Richard a rat several times, as it was unfair to compare him to such a misunderstood species. And hey, maybe you're right. But please understand, I meant human rat. It's a different species, not to be confused with the common rat. Next. The true horror of Blake libel is a case that I have no corrections or further updates for. On Making a Monster, I misspelled the name Columbia, which is pretty dumb. And I don't have much to add to the Devil on Bus 1170. One thing about the Devil on Bus 1170 is that I read someone say that one of the officers that responded to this case ended up taking their own life. Apparently, this was likely connected to what he witnessed in regard to this case. If this is true, rest in peace. But the big final update on cases I've covered in 2021 goes to what happened in apartment 8641, the story of Christy and Hilda, the two women that were left drugged and unresponsive at two separate hospitals in LA in November. We knew Christy Giles had passed away on the scene where she was found outside the hospital. Last time we spoke about this case, Christy's friend Hilda, the designer from Mexico, was still fighting for her life. Sadly, not long ago, she too passed away right around the time of her birthday, when her family had to make the very hard decision to take her off life support. There was no chance for her to recover. Rest in peace, Christy and Hilda. But just a couple days ago, 3 men were arrested in connection with this case. One of the men was 47-year-old Michael Ansbach, an ex-cameraman from the TV show Vanderpump Rules, and the second man was 42-year-old Brant Osborne, an extra off NCIS LA. Brant was actually arrested on the set of NCIS LA. Both of these men are believed to have been in the car that dropped off Christy and Hilda at the hospitals. They've been charged with accessory to manslaughter with bail set at $100,000 each. Both Michael Ansbach and Brant Osborne have been released on bail. And the third man that was arrested was none other than 37-year-old David Pierce, the suspect Zoolander wannabe from the original video I made on Christy and Hilda. He's actually Brant Osborne's roommate, and they'd been living at that apartment for about 6 months. Not only has David Pierce been arrested, but his bail is set at $1 million. According to the Daily Beast, David Murrieta Jr., an actor and stuntman, told the Post that Brant Osborne had boasted about the big weekend being the craziest weekend of his life. Osborne reportedly told Murrieta about the party. He said Christy and Hilda came back to the apartment and took a bunch of drugs. Osborne said he left the party for a while, and when he returned, David Pierce told him that Christy was dead. After checking her pulse, they decided not to call 911 and instead try to figure out what to do with her body.
I've read the speculation.
And wouldn't it be better to just tell people what really happened? I mean, I think then you would have a chance to set the record straight, maybe.
A lot of what's being written.
A lot of what's been written is, do you think...
Slander.
Slander. Could you tell me about some of the things that are wrong?
No comment.
The DA for LA County says David Pierce is now also being charged with assaulting a woman in 2010, as well as another in February of 2019, and at least another 2 incidents in 2020. Damn, Dave, it's not looking good for you. Actor Stevebauer from Scarface, you know, Al Pacino's best friend in the movie, yeah, that guy. He told the Daily Mail that he witnessed David Pierce assault a woman in 2008 at a house party in Beverly Hills when they were roommates. Apparently, David Pierce disappeared with a young Latina woman, and her friend got worried when she couldn't find her. So Stevebauer and the missing woman's friend began searching. Moments later, the missing young woman bursts out of a room crying. So Dave tried to hurry Steve out of the party, saying, "Don't listen to her. This is a stupid party. Let's get out of here." He did this while desperately trying to get Bauer to get into his car. But Steve made Pierce take the 2 women home as well. They sat in the back as Pierce sped down the road. The crying woman in the back seat said David had cornered her and locked the door. She told him he didn't want to do anything and said that she wasn't into him. He insisted that she did like him and then proceeded to force himself upon the woman. David continued to claim that she was a liar. Nothing more than a maid, he said. She'll brag about this later, Pierce claimed at the time. A physical altercation between David Pierce and Stevebauer ensued. Then Bauer promptly moved out of David's spare room and didn't have much to do with him after that. He recalls that Pierce seemed like a nice guy for about a week, but his true darkness emerged when he began making a lot of bold statements about drugging women to have his way with them. Steve hoped Pierce was joking at the time, but it soon became obvious that David wasn't kidding. Oh, and remember Reicherman, the bass player from the Scorpions that TMZ had the snuff party interview with? He said he went to David Pierce's apartment once to visit Stevebauer, but Steve wasn't home. So David let him in and showed him around. Ralph said David had an adult movie blasting from his bedroom and showed Ralph a stack of women's IDs in his apartment, which he handed out to young girls to get them into clubs. He also had dozens of credit cards not in his name. He refused to give an explanation about the cards. But when Ralph asked David why he needed IDs to get girls into clubs, David said it was because a lot of the girls they hung out with were underage. Then Ralph says young girls started showing up at the apartment where Dave would give them one of the IDs to go out with later. He says these girls were very, very young. That's when Ralph says he decided to leave and excused himself. My question to Ralph and Steve is, why didn't you report David? Why did you let this go? This man was clearly a serial predator of women and girls, yet you let him slide and now 2 girls are dead. It's not your fault, but you could have been the reason these lives were still living. What a shame. For what? To not be a snitch? To mind your own business? It was your business. But that's just my opinion, and nobody wants to hear that. Anyway, it's a big update and a massive step forward for justice. I do wonder if Ron Jeremy ties into this in some way, but I guess we'll find out. I hope David Pierce and the other 2 guys get exactly what they deserve. As for the families of both Christy and Hilda, Christmas and life will never be the same. I hope they find some strength in each other during this horrible time. And for now, that's all the updates I have on cases. It's been an amazing year for me with a huge successful start to this channel. The growth has been something I could have never anticipated. I apologize for the downtime in between uploads, but it really does take a long time to make these productions. And from script to video, it's all me. Plus, I like to dive in deep and not skim over any details. I have a lot of cool stuff happening next year in our new studio building that we're currently finishing up, and I'm really hoping to use this space to evolve this channel. And because of the content I cover, and my unwillingness to censor my words, YouTube limits my ad revenue significantly, almost to 0. So, if you like hanging out to chat, playing games, and being a part of exclusive events plus some extra content, then why not come over to my Patreon? It's only around $1 a month, and that directly funds the channel. There's a link in the description below. If you can, you can. If you can't, no big deal. Again, it's been an amazing year for this channel, and I hope you all have a good one, and continue to take this journey with me into 2022. Happy holidays and Happy New Year to all. Considering the disturbing nature of the topics I discuss, you are an absolute pleasure to create for. Thank you all. I'm Mr. Black, and this is the disturbing truth.